Hey, everybody, what's up? Welcome to another exciting episode of the Spinal Corner with Dr. Joey Kramer. Hey, so last week, or no, actually, let me start over. So, we are on this journey of really breaking down the nervous system, the human nervous system, this idea of diving into upper cervical care and its connection to neurological performance. And for the last several weeks, we've been really working from a very, very high level of asking questions like, what is the nervous system? Asking questions like, what are the parts of it? What are the functions of it? And then just last week, we went through this idea of what are signs and symptoms of a dysfunctional nervous system. And I totally understand this can be a little abstract as we go into it because yeah, it's not a broken foot, right? Or it's not a, sinus infection with some yellow snot coming out, right? We are talking about presentation of self, right? Which is a really hard thing to navigate, mainly because like you're like, well, I get vertigo, I get headaches, I get, I have these weird classifications of like Meniere's disease or trigeminal neuralgia, or I've had, maldated Barkman or headaches, right? And you're going through this, like, how do I help myself with this? And how do I know where to begin for a root cause? And so today, after last week, we talked about the ideas of what are the signs and the symptoms of a dysfunctional nervous system. Today, we are going to dive into this idea that many of you are really, really anxious to get into, which is how do I improve the function of my nervous system? Or how do I destroy the function of my nervous system? And I think this is a really, really good leadway into this idea of discussing adaptation and how we can habitually improve the resilience of the human body over time, right? So I don't know if I've ever shared this, but like one of my goals is to be a centenarian in life. And so to be a centenarian, you have to evaluate various ways that your neurological performance can maintain or actually improve over time, right? And that's really where this all stems from. And so I am going to get us over on the screen share. Where are we going here? Let's get over here so we can talk through this wonderful, wonderful thing that we're about to dive into. And so I have for us this idea of a whiteboard here that we're going to talk about, which is how to improve my nervous system function. And also, we could actually come up here or how to destroy it, right? And so, what I do on this is divide this into two different sections and categories, right? We have one category over here. It is called eustress. And for those of you who don't know, it's the opposite of distress, right? And in this, if we look at these two things, eustress would be considered the positive factors that would improve adaptation. And remember, adaptation is nothing more than the nervous system responding properly to the internal and external environment. Distress would be a negative indicator or reasons for decreasing adaptation. This would mean that you are not properly functioning on your internal or your external environment, thus having that litany of symptomatic presentation we talked about last week. So today, what I want to do is I'm going to start on the negative because this is the one that we can all be familiar with and get through super quick. In distress, BJ Palmer, the upper cervical founding father, listed it out two T's and an A. He called it was trauma, and then he had toxins, and then he had something called autosuggestion. Now, this is going to be really interesting because most chiropractors will call it three T's, right? You can call this thoughts. However, for many of you, you may come up to this question of asking yourself, how did I develop a neurological problem over time? And why is this suddenly happening to me? This is very common in Meniere's patients. It's very common in people that have blood pressure related issues or migraine headaches, right? It's like, hey, why did these all of a sudden start? Why have they not gone away? I've tried the Botox, I take the medication, the side effects suck. There's got to be a different problem to this. And the reason that I go into these three that we're going to talk about is because all of them overwhelm your neurological system. They inhibit adaptation. They cause a negative survival value. That's another good term for this. And they end up creating this disease presentation in your body. And so, what I look at with this when I talk about these areas with patients, trauma is pretty obvious for most of us. Trauma can be physical, right? So you can I'm going to give us a new column here, but if we go into trauma, you can break this down into the idea of having physical, like a car wreck, a concussion, a slip on a sidewalk, right? Something along those lines. Trauma can be emotional. You can go through the death of a child, you can go through the death of a spouse, the death of a loved one, like a parent. You can have, segregation at school. You could be bullied. You can have, so just those things, right, that are emotionally overwhelming to you, right? You can go through financial ruin. That is another form of it. You can go through spiritual desolation, right? That's another form of trauma you can go through. I also like to say that you can look at like relationships, right? You can go through divorce. You can go through children. Things can be struggles there, right? That's a big one that we can talk about. You can also talk about social, right? And that's going to be new for us because Palmer didn't have Facebook or TikTok or Twitter or any of these things. So social trauma can actually overwhelm your body's ability to adapt, right? So each one of these are pretty simple to look at because your body will harness onto them or hold onto them, and it will cause your nervous system to not function properly. So you'll encounter those areas, right? And so like I can give you an example for myself. I was bullied when I was like, I don't know, fifth grade through eighth grade by just a group of kids. And it caused a lot of harm mentally on my confidence and the ability to talk to people or to talk in front of people. So I've had to work very hard to overcome it. But you still have this very firm resistance that you hit when you're getting into that situation that reminds you of what it was like when that was happening, right? That you guys are palpable in that. If you've ever been in a car wreck, it's like the first time you have to approach a red light after getting rear-ended or drive through an intersection after getting T-boned. Your heart's going to race. You're going to have a sympathetic reaction. You're going to, be ready for fight or flight. The next piece that I brought up on this was going to be the toxic exposure. Now, can be an entire podcast in itself, but in today's day and age, this is really simple. You're going to have to look at your food. You're going to have to look at soil. You're going to have to look at water. You can go into mold. We can go into air quality, right? These are all things that we are cesspooling ourselves with. We can go into Wi-Fi, right? You can go into 5G. You can go into indoor environments with you removing yourself from the sun, et cetera, right? This is all just an accumulation of things that are going on. And so they can lead to that to happen in your body. They can also lead to maladaptation. And so finally was autosuggestion. And I think that you can think yourself into being ill, right? That's the idea behind this whole thing. So on the distress side of things, these are really simple, right? It's like these are all the things that I do in my daily habits or that have happened to me that maybe I haven't thought about, right? That maybe create this environment of problems, right? So, like if we go down to the toxins here, food and soil are endocrine disruptors that we have. Water is an endocrine disruptor. It can totally throw off your entire neurophysiology. Mold is an endocrine disruptor. Wi-Fi is going to be an endocrine disruptor. Air quality is, 5G is, indoor is. Every single one of these is a neurophysiological disruptor that destroys the body from the outside in, right? Food is going to be inside out because you're trying to absorb it. But these are all things that can contribute to a disease process in your body. On the flip side of this, we are going to talk about eustress. And eustress are the positive things you can do to help improve neurological performance. And I think this can be summarized into this is a long list that we're going to get into here. A lot of this has been happening recently. I would tell you in the last 5 years, maybe 7 years is more realistic. It's probably where all the early adapters have been. It's been on my radar for quite some time because I really am I like the biohack. So if you ever drank buttered coffee, you guys, you tried this whole thing out. You went down this path. You've seen this. But if you haven't, and this is new to you, this idea of, hey, I have a nervous system and doc, how do I improve its function? This is going to be right up your alley. So in 2021, one really famous book that came out was a book called Breathe. Breathe was a book that was designed to help you understand the respiratory pathway of the human body and how important it is that you work on nasal breathing or, taping your mouth shut at night to put yourself into a parasympathetic state. It actually helps your resilience and it helps you get this better quality of oxygen saturation in your body, which, as you should know, drives the majority of your metabolic processes in the system. On the same boat, you could look at a guy called Wim Hof. He's the Iceman. He has this really awesome breathing protocol you can go through. They just help you improve your adaptive capacities, right? So those are two things on the breathing situation that you guys can look into. Another one I like is a Navy SEAL method. It's called box breathing. And this one is nothing more than a 4-second inhale through your nose, a 4-second hold, a 4-second exhale through your nose, and a 4-second hold. So I call it the rule of fours. And then you repeat that for, roughly 4 times, right? So you develop this ability to work on calming your nervous system down, especially in a state of like fear or anxiety. It's really good to center yourself from that. The second category we're going to get into is a category called autonomic resilience. And if you all remember, autonomic is that you have the same thing happening subconsciously in your body, and it's going to be called resilience. And in this, the sole purpose is what can I do day in and day out to habitually influence my nervous system performance so that I can be at my very best. And so what I do with this is we dive into all the little things that you can do on a day in and day out basis that become a habit. Now, don't let this overwhelm you. It's super important that you you evaluate these and you say, hey, these are like 5 that I want to do. I'm going to explore them for a 90-day window and see what happens, right? You can do all of them if you want to. Go ahead. I mean, be my guest if you have that, that ability. The other option is for you to pick a handful and just work through them. And so in this, when I look at autonomic resiliency, we're going to talk about high intensity interval training, right? That's a super important way that you can build resilience in this. Long, slow walks. Super important. We're talking an hour at a time, outdoors. You are spending time in nature, in the sun, breathing fresh air, away from the city, outside, and like drive out to a trail and like just get out there and walk amongst nature, right? There's a super important way to do this. The latest fad of 2020 into 2023 was, or 2022 to 2023 was the cold plunge. I'm not a cold guy. I don't do plunges. I know people who do it. They love it. If I had a worse disease process, I probably would do plunging, but it's excellent for you. If you want more data on that, you can look up a guy named Andrew Huberman. He has incredible plunge protocols that you can work through that will help you build that autonomic resilience. I am more of the opposite side, which is sauna, right? I love doing an infrared sauna with red light therapy. I'd also look at Andrew Huberman for how to improve or to implement a sauna protocol into your day-to-day life. Next one that you have to focus on is your ability to sleep and or nap. Super important. Most people benefit greatly from a nap between 1 and 3 in the afternoon, somewhere around 10 to 20 minutes. It's a great way to give your body a moment to relax, to let your nervous system just calm down and get back into the game for the second part of the day. Sleep, you got to get somewhere between 7 and 8 hours. You recommend a dark, cold environment for this, right? Probably use a weighted blanket. We can add that on there if we want to. Weighted blanket is going to be super important for you. Those things will help you build that resilience of your nervous system. Nutrition, this is a whole podcast in itself. We'll dive into that one later. I am a huge proponent of getting outdoors and preferably like if you're a man's shirt off, if you're a woman's sports bra, what's it called? A bathing suit top, right? Get out there, backyard and just absorb sun. Ideally, first thing in the morning, right? Last thing in the evening. I'd also look at sleep protocols from Huberman on best practices for really exposing yourself to the sun, right? I got weighted blankets on there. Grounding is another good idea, right? These are all like the external things you can be doing that can be a part of your life to improve adaptation. You got to work out. You got to spend time with cardio health. This is an autonomic stressor. This is an autonomic stressor to encourage adaptation. This is designed to help you recover on the autonomic system. This actually helps give you a parasympathetic input. Nutrition is going to decrease inflammatory responses. Sunshine is going to promote vitamin D production, which is huge for the driving the performance of your neurological state and your biophysiological processes. Grounding allows you to dump off all that 5G nonsense into the earth and help you just recoup everything that you have lost. The last piece of eustress that I want to get into that's super important is the process of adaptation. And when we are talking about adaptation, I am talking about the root cause problem of a majority of you with your neurological system. So many of you already do these things that are considered eustress, right? Or the autonomic resilience side of things. Some of these are part of your life. Many of you work out. Many of you like to walk outdoors. A lot of you love to sauna. A lot of you love to plunge. Most of you try to sleep. Most of you try to eat healthy. But the one thing many of you do not do, because this has never crossed your brain, is the thought of how do I improve adaptation? And the way that you can improve adaptation is simple. It is upper cervical chiropractic. Now, many of you get that term chiropractic and you're like, oh, this is a joke, right? Bone crunchers. Oh, I got some pain on my neck. I got some pain in my back. Have you guys seen that Y-strap doctor on social media? Have you guys watched that ring dinger? Man, that's so funny. Let's go adjust some skeletons like they're breaking their body, right? That's a load of trash, right? When we start getting into neurological performance, we start talking about adaptation, we start talking about thermography, and we start looking at the balance of the neurological state and really evaluating, how are you doing from a parasympathetic and sympathetic performance segment. And the majority of us living in America, probably about 77%, are sympathetic dominant, right? So we are running in that overdrive of stress, which is perpetually bombarding our nervous system, which is inhibiting its ability to adapt, which is causing us to have a symptomatic presentation. And the fascinating piece about this is that adaptation is regulated by the fight or flight response, which is regulated by the positioning of C1 and C2 in relation to your skull and your neck. Those two things have a huge, huge, huge impact on the ability of your body to adapt to internal and external stressors, right? So if we look at C1, that's going to be vagal tone. We look at C2, we're looking at lower brainstem. We're looking at how well all these nerves are able to fire properly. And when you have this misalignment of this area, putting pressure on that entire system, right? Choking down that cylinder that is our spinal cord, over time, what ends up happening is you start having a faulty performance, right? On our original idea of like having the brain, right, and then the body, and these two talking to one another, you are starting to have traffic jams, and that's causing an interruption in signal mechanisms to allow you to adapt to your internal and external environment. That is probably why many of you will tell me, Doc, I do a cold plunge, my anxiety goes away for about 5, 6 hours, and then it all comes back. I do the sauna, I feel great, but then I have to go back again the next day, right? Many of these are signs that your body is resilient and wanting to respond to adaptation. However, it's not getting to the root cause. And what I've seen is that when you start to incorporate an upper cervical chiro into your protocol, you will improve your resilience of adaptation, which will then allow all these external things you are doing to increase significantly and create for you the desired health results that you are seeking, right? Notice that I didn't say you just get to do this one time and quit. It is a habitual process because we are constantly bombarded here. These things are hitting us 24/7 every single day of our lives from conception to death, right? So in the meantime, you have to combat that. You have to go the alternative route where you are fighting back with your daily habits of eustress. And so what I plead with you and what I encourage you is that when you start asking about nervous system performance and improvement, it is not done with gabapentin. It is not done with a cortisol injection. It's not done with taking prednisone. These are all depressants. They are all designed to inhibit your brain from perceiving the body. They come with wicked side effects, and they are not truly getting to the root cause. If we want to get to the root cause, we have to limit our distress. We have to improve our eustress, and we have to get to the root cause problem by addressing your upper cervical spine. After we get that stabilized and you are on your path to getting healthy, you can maximize your expression by continually investing in adaptation habits, right? So today, what we learned was there are multiple ways to destroy your nervous system. There's multiple ways to improve your nervous system. Ultimately, your choice is going to be how well do I limit this? How well do I maximize this? And how well do I incorporate upper cervical into my regime? That, my friends, is how we talk about neurological system performance. It's not drugs, it's not surgery, it's not eye movements, right? This is simply what are the root cause problems? What can I do from an outside in perspective? And how do we limit our body from the subjection of distress that we are in Western America? Thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Upper Cervical Corner. I'll be back next week with more relative content to upper cervical care, nervous system performance, and how you can maximize your expression of health.